Okay. All right, let's look at a few other charts. So here's the lunar eclipse that we're coming into. So particularly when we're talking about kind of places where there's more volatility, like Iran and Ukraine. We're going to kind of look at how this is impacting these countries. Now, Western astrology is pretty focused on personal, so it's all personal. When we look at outer planet, bigger transitions, and we're looking more globally. So I don't know exactly quite how to answer that question right now, but we'll see how that comes along. All right, first of all, let's just pull up the chart for Russia, because this is going to be around the same chart as Ukraine, because the Russian Federation happened 1990. This is the time period when the Soviet Union dissolved and formed, I don't know, 13, 17 different countries, and Ukraine was one of them. So around this time period of 1990 is the beginning time of this separation. Now, it happened a couple of years after Chernobyl exploded in the Ukraine, which was then part of the Soviet Union. And that was, now I'm forgetting, but it was sometime between 86 and 89 that happened. So I want to think about Russia, Ukraine, also like historically, and that there's something that might be resolving itself there in this time period. Hopefully, they're not just going to destroy everything that's there in the process. But Ukraine is part of the Crimean Peninsula. So if you remember the Crimean War, I remember just hearing about the Crimean War and being like, I don't know what the flip that is. Like, where is that? So it's kind of a port area along Ukraine. So that Crimean War happened in the mid 1800s between Russia and the Middle East, and which was the Ottoman Empire at the time, and which was being funded. Empire was being funded by Britain and Europe. So to set the stage, there's been contention in this area for centuries. This is not just an area that's kind of established itself in a certain, it's not Switzerland, let's just say. So Russia during World War II, Stalin, massive kind of takeover, Soviet Union kind of stepped into this world power at that time. When we get to the 1980s, it's falling apart and it's separating into all these different countries. It just so it's the Gorbachev years, it's the glasnost, it's this kind of the policies of Stalin that closed off and boarded everything up. So remember, like Rudolf Nureyev defecting, and this energy of defecting that was happening in the 1970s, where these ballet dancers and athletes were trying to get out but couldn't get out. We had this real sense of this closed in. And then it had this kind of moment where it kind of opened its doors and opened to the possibility of something new. And that was the beginning of Russia and Ukraine being two separate countries. And then Russia kind of slipped back into somewhat of an autocracy, with Putin coming into his presidency. I don't know, was it a decade later, 2000? I mean, he's been kind of in charge for a long time. So I want, like, when thinking about this energy, when I think about Russia and the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia, there's a very different kind of quality to it than the United States. I mean, for some of the obvious reasons, but also because this is an area, a land where they have had their entire government change. All, you know, so many people in Russia were alive in the 1990s and were part of, you know, this massive kind of unknown shift. I mean, think about the pandemic and how much we were all like, whoa, what's happening? Think about if the entire country's structure shifted, you know, in a window of a couple of years. That is incredibly unsettling. And that unsettling energy is part of what's erupting as we move closer and closer towards Pluto moving into extreme declination in 2026. This is, I think, the last kind of gasp of this this oil oligarchy, oil based, I mean, this is part of Iran too, and the Middle East, and the shifts as oil, which has been such a part of the commerce. It's almost like we trade in money, but oil has a lot to do, energy has so much to do with the underpinnings of our economy. When we started in the 1860s, I mean, that's when Rockefeller first discovered, or he didn't discover oil. Oil was kind of pouring out of Russia for centuries, that they used it for oiling things. But the Industrial Revolution that was really taking off in the 1860s, and with the creation of the oil wells in the United States in that time period, during World War II, around that time period is when they're discovering oil, a little bit before that, but uncovering oil in the Middle East. And oil is becoming the main commerce. I mean, it was kind of the underpinnings of World War II. I mean, who was supplying oil to who? I mean, they were in charge, really. So when we look at kind of the oil crisis and this shift right now, in terms of power dynamics in the world, Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, the United States, even in terms of which states have power, Texas, where's the power in Texas? What are they going to do? What's happening there? What's shifting there? All of these kind of different power, you know, what's BP doing? What's these underpinnings are, it's kind of like the dragon dying, like this massive underpinnings of our economy going through these painful kind of dying process. And in the time it's dying, it's like screaming, it's like lashing about, it's like, so these places that have seen revolutions before, like in Russia and Iran, are in some ways a little bit better suited for the revolutions that are coming, because these are people that have lived through these crises. And when it's time, when the energy moves into that air fire energy, when it's activated in a way that people aren't clinging for security, like Pluto and Capricorn, like Neptune and Pisces, like Uranus and Taurus, is all like, we want security. When that energy shifts, there'll be revolution, and it may be peaceful. It may be that there's so many people that really have done their inner work, that there's been all this process, particularly as Neptune's been in Pisces, of how do we do nonviolent resistance. This has been a massive movement since, well, activated in the 1860s. True, you know, here's nonviolent resistance in India with Gandhi, and during World War II, and then all the civil rights movements throughout the world that have been activated since World War II. This is this time where we're seeing end of peak oil, end of oil being an actual substance that we can continue to mine from the earth, as we scrape out the barrel, like, you know, with this fracking and this super fracking, that we're ending this, even if there's billions or trillions of gallons of oil still available. Oil is a commodity, it's dying. And so people who have already seen massive change in the world, particularly places where they have not much left to lose, there's going to be this kind of massive awakening. Unfortunately, I still feel like it's about 2 years away. And I think looking at Putin's chart, let's just see the transits for him. Wait, first, let's go back to Russia. I didn't bring this up. Here's Russia's sun at 21 degrees Gemini. So Mars retrograde is activating this. It might even feel like it's empowering Russia, but I don't have the Ukraine chart. Sorry. I think it would be the same though. So so it would have probably happened at least in the same month. So this, but I actually, to be honest, I just want to say I'm not sure about that. That this is this Mars retrograde is activating it. The eclipses are activating Venus opposite Pluto. That doesn't concern me that like it could support things getting a little more intense before they kind of erupt and shift there. Now let's look at Putin's chart. Eclipses are hitting his Venus, which aligns with Russia's Venus. I mean, that's kind of true patriotism, kind of true kind of like love for the country. Well, the Mars retrograde is activating his Mars also. Unfortunately, none of this is telling me that there's any conclusion to this soon. Maybe in January when Mars goes direct. And the other thing about eclipses is they can flip things. They can turn things upside down. So what's been up could be down. What's been down could be up. So there might be some breakthroughs in here. Here's Iran's chart, 1977. There's another 1979. You know what? I don't want to continue looking at this because I can't remember if that's its current or if there's been a new Iran. But I think both countries, in a way, are headed towards revolution. And that doesn't have to be a violent, bloody revolution, but they're in for massive changes, particularly 2026. Yeah. Okay, so transits for 2024 election. Don't know the date yet, but this will get me close enough. All right, so not happening during eclipses. Pluto will be at the end of Capricorn. So it's not quite into Aquarius yet, which means it may be some of the old might have another 4 years or 2 years of some kind of old guard kind of energy. Yeah, everything's still in the earth water element. I think the divisiveness that's happening in the country is probably not going to kind of end any, until 2026. So this looks like we're still in this place of wanting that kind of security, that kind of holding back, particularly with Saturn and Pisces. I mean, I think we're in a time and have been for, well, I think the eclipse in January of 2019, January 2020, has really activated time of real uncertainty, difficult to navigate these waters. Personally, bringing it into the personal, like, how do we think about our future? Where do we want to live? What kind of work we want to do? I think we're having to kind of trust a lot in our own inner intuition. It's not easy to see the path ahead during this time. I think it's going to get easier when we get to 2026. For now, I think it's still a good time to be making big life changes over these next 2 years, particularly if you can feel into that time in 2026. If you can even just meditate, tune in, think about the air fire element. You may want to do a ritual that's like air fire element, that kind of is a portal to 2026. Even just setting your intention for, where do I want to be in the spring of 2026? Can help you navigate through these couple of years where, particularly as Saturn moves into Pisces in the spring, it's a lot of trust, a lot of go with the flow. It may feel like we're still like cast out in the ocean with like no sense of like what's up or down, what's north, south, east, or west. But if you have the stars to guide you, then you might like look up and see, okay, there's stars out there, and I have a sense of where I am from that. I think that it's not necessarily like this bad time in a certain way. Like, there can be a lot of magic as we do a lot of healing. Like, these can be profound years for healing ancestral things, for healing the past, for healing trauma. It can be a really good time for healing from addiction. Can be a good time to change our relationship to pharmaceuticals. It can be a time when we're doing some deep healing work, the kind of things that shut things down, close things off, that help us to do the inner work, are likely to continue happening over the next 2 years. And help us kind of get ready, help us feel more and more available for those big shifts that are coming 2026. Yeah, it's good for clearing out the old gunk. So I think, even doing it on a, like, clear out your houses, clear out your rooms, clear out your drawers, clear out just simple things, start with your refrigerator, especially during this eclipse time. And the more kind of we actively work to link into the portals. So use this portal right now to connect in with January, to connect in with March. Let's just pull up, December 1st, 1991. Thank you. I'll pull it up. 12/01/1. You spelled Kiev. That's why I was like, I know how to spell Chernobyl. It's just going to be close enough. Sorry. Correct. Well, if that is their date, then that sun at 8 degrees Sagittarius is well aspected by Mars in January, activating that might be pretty empowering for the people of Ukraine when we get to January. So throughout this time period, thank you for getting this, because when I think about this chart, I can feel the energy of them really kind of establishing their own power more clearly throughout the winter. There's a difference between the Russian soldiers who are just getting forced to go to war in Ukraine, that's fighting for their country, and their people and their families. This Mars retrograde might actually benefit Ukraine in a certain way. It could turn things around. I mean, certainly there's a reversal that's happening with Mars. All right. Somebody asked about the stock market. I'm going to come back to, actually, I want to pull up, there's another aspect that I want to talk about that's happening in March. Just some point around the Ides of March. Okay. So, oops, sorry, this is wrong. All right, so what's happening here is Jupiter and Chiron, which we haven't talked about much, are conjunct in Aries. So they're bringing in the air fire element, the fire element in particular. This is really good for love and relationships. When these two get together, they activate kind of true love, opening up to love and relationships. So one thing for a lot of you, this is going to be supportive to you for, new relationships or helping your current relationships grow. So this is a good time to kind of put yourselves out there, particularly a little bit earlier in March when Venus is in this. Venus, Jupiter, Chiron, these are the three planets that are about love. The only one, there's 3 out of 4, and Neptune is the only one that's not there. And look at this time period, we've got a nice conjunction of Mars and Sun, and Saturn's moving into Pisces. So there's some like nice love energy. We've got Mars exactly at the point where it went retrograde. So there's a portal moment that's actually leading into this love piece. All right, so somebody was asking about the stock market. So the stock market is particularly connected to some of the earth elements, particularly Taurus, which is a sign that's connected to money. So I don't think it's going to settle down anytime soon. I think it's a gambling thing. I mean, I have money in the market, so I'm not like projecting this is about you or something, but it is volatile, and I think it will continue to be up and down. I'm actually surprised it's not more up and down. I was thinking it would be a little bit more volatile than it is. And we'll see. It might be a little bit more intense in the next month. And then it might kind of settle down a bit in November. But we're in November already. So settling down in December. I mean, this kind of thing is so manipulated by, the feds and the powers that be up there that are deciding interest rates. I think we're in a restructuring phase, and I mean, there's a possibility that we may make it through the 2020s into the 2030s and still have an economy, but that's much more based on, well, some of the things that they're putting in, carbon fuel tax and carbon credits, and things that are more environmentally supportive. And maybe those will be manipulated, but as we kind of go through the late 2020s, there'll be this sense that our economy has to start mirroring more directly the changes that need to happen. So that might be a kind of up and down process. As we move into kind of sacred awakening, how we work with the synchronicities of money and resources and the things that we want and the things that we need, we might get like more finely tuned to being able to manifest the things that we need and want. I mean, if we just have some kind of technologies, new technologies that support us having off the grid heat and off the grid air conditioning or off the grid kind of ability to not be so reliant on the infrastructure of any of the countries that exist right now. More psychic surgeries and alternative medicine practices, as these things can really take off in the next couple of years. And then all the stuff that we want, which is already made, can be also like we can more easily manifest the exact thing that we want because it's already in existence physically. And we can have our needs met in these ways that are less dependent on these kind of crumbling infrastructure pieces. And some of it may crumble and we may have to deal with that. Yeah, it's not, we were all born for this, right? We were all living in this time. We're all here because we're meant to be part of this shift that's happening. So getting clear about our own particular purpose, sinking into that more deeply, committing to that. I think next year will be a good time to move if you're finding that the place where you're living isn't quite the right resonant place. So the spring, summer, I think there'll be the opportunity to move, even though I think it's going to get harder and harder to make these kind of big cross-country moves or move to a new country. But I think there's an opening that's happening next year. Probably, I mean, this winter will be great if you're already in movement and you're like sensing, like if you're in alignment with the eclipses and you're ready to just kind of really completely shred the past and the place that you've been, and you're ready for something new, and you can be in a time of transition rather than feeling like you need to move and land immediately, because it'll be hard to kind of ground and really until Mars goes direct in January. But if you can be in the transition, you might find that there's a lot of synchronicity around movement at this time. All right. Okay, let's see, looking for any other questions. How's Joe doing? I mean, Joe's entered a difficult time. Here's where I want to, jump into the Vedic, and I've talked about this before because he's let's pull up his dashas. Here's his dasha sequence, and he's been in Jupiter from September 2026 till September 22nd, 2022. He'll be in Saturn until he's 99, which I don't think he's going to live that long. And now let's go back to his chart. So Saturn is, it's angular, so there's power here. But it's not a friend to the chart, so it's a little bit of a difficult planet. It's certainly like he has this fantastic Jupiter exalted in the ninth house of leadership. So I think the Saturn time period is definitely a slowing down time, more obstacles. I mean, I think this is a time where he probably just wants to slow down and stay home. But that Jupiter exalted is probably going to continue to feed him. The Mars retrograde is aspecting his Saturn. It's up here in Taurus in the Vedic. It'll be there. So it's it could be an intense moment. I have a feeling we're in for at least something flipping to the GOP in this election, because it looks like he's kind of dealing with obstacles and enemies. Saturn's not particularly about health issues, although that would make sense that part of it would be him aging and slowing down in a way. Yeah. Usually these dasha shifts would already be taking place, but I guess it's only been a month, not quite 2 months. So, and certainly they could be keeping some things hidden from us around it. Yeah. Especially through these elections. I wonder if after the elections it'll come out that Biden is having some more issues or difficulties. Then, like right now, there'd be like this sense of having to keep him propped up. It's still not going to really surprise me if next year he doesn't step out and Kamala Harris steps into leadership. I pulled up her chart here. So she moves, let me just look at her. So she is in Rahu, which is the North Node time period. It's the time period of politics. That Rahu rules politics. It rules desire and ambition and drive. And so she's in the middle of it. She's not going through a major dasha shift, but she's in Rahu Mercury. In January, she moves into Rahu Ketu. And that's a particularly kind of Rahu Ketu throughout 2023 is a particular, like, it's usually a spiritual transit where we have kind of an awakening, a radical shift, but it feels like our lives are not in our control in that time period. So February 2024, it looks like Rahu Venus is a lot more, grounded for her, a lot more supportive. So that first year, 2023, if she's stepping into a bigger role, let's see, her Rahu's in the first house. It's a very potent place for it. It's connected to her purpose. So she's stepping more and more into her purpose. With Mercury, her Mercury is well placed. It's the ruler of her chart. So right now she's in this Mercury sub period that's really good and helpful for her. K2 is going to be the big turnaround year. Then her Venus is well placed also, and it's good. Not necessarily as good as Mercury, but it's like she gets her strength back in that time period. So it won't surprise me if that shift in power happens next year. All right. Any other questions? I'm gonna stop the share and stop the recording here.